then my living shall not be in vain. No, my living shall not be in vain. If I can help somebody as I pass along, then my living shall not be in vain. Thank you so much. Thank you. And Tara set me up. So I felt like I had to come and share in that way, which is actually an honor for me. What was not named is that my undergraduate degree was in music, and anytime I get to use my voice in that way, it's just a beautiful thing. So I am honored to be here and be in this space. As we get started tonight, I want to share that I start with that song in many places that I go, because it is the song that speaks to the core of my life. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the assassination of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. That song was sung at his funeral by the late, great Mahalia Jackson. I remember that day very clearly. And I remember it because it was the day that I went to school and my teacher was crying. And I didn't fully understand what all that was about, but I knew that it mattered. And so I say that from that time, I don't know whether that is the day that the spirit of Dr. King came alive in me, or if Dr. King actually entered me in that moment. But I do know that for the rest of my life, it has been important to me to pay attention to what it means to create liberty and justice for all. And so I stand today honoring the shoulders that I stand on. I stand today honoring the land that we occupy today, recognizing Native and Indigenous folks, and that what happened for them and to them, we have today get to sit and benefit from. I stand today to honor my grandparents and those like them who built this land. And so I invite you to pay attention to and invite the energy of those who were here at ODK over 100 years ago to start this great organization. And so we honor their knowing, we honor their legacy, and we breathe them in to co-learn in this space together tonight. I want to appreciate the leadership of ODK. I appreciate certainly the board and all of the circles. I want to appreciate the staff and Tara and all of those folks there who have already become very close to me and taken care of me. And I want to honor you, those of you who decided to be here and are willing to do the work to represent the leadership for the next round. What I want to say tonight in this few minutes that I have is I want to invite you to consider this notion that leadership is not convenient. That leadership takes commitment and persistence, and especially to hang in there when we don't feel like it. And so I know that I, along with the award ceremony, is the thing standing between you and the party, as this is your last night here in Nashville. And so I'm not going to be before you long. I got really clear instructions. I had about 15 minutes. And so with that, I am going to operate out of my mentor's teachings around the 3 B's: to be good, to be brief, and to be seated. So in that, I am glad to be here today. I'm glad that you've stepped up to leadership. And I titled my remarks, Leadership for the Next Round, We Are Better Together. Now, many of you have participated in leadership experiences before. Certainly as ODK folks, you know a little bit about that. But I know that most of you in the room will not remember technology from the 80s. When a time when there was actually dial-up, right? When you got mail. A time when there was actually no high speed, right? A time when a mobile phone was actually for the car, right? And you carried that into the car with you. Well, I share that as I start right now because one of the things that I have found as I move about the country, and leadership is a part very core to the work that I believe that we must do around social justice, diversity, and inclusion, and that is how we show up as leaders is critical, right? And what I have found is that lots of folks, as you think about technology, if we were still using the technology from the 80s, how many of you would agree that we'd be missing some things? Right? We'd not have some connections and not have some opportunities. Well, I believe that lots of us are doing leadership with 1980s technology. And I want to invite us tonight to consider what it's going to take to lead for the next round. What we need to be prepared to do and what we need to be prepared to think about. And so I want you to get ready to take in about 10 things. And I decided to allow myself the pastoral thing and do 10 commitments instead of commandments. And so I thought about this from the lens of Christendom, that I would offer us 10 commitments for the next round of leaders. I want to honor, even as I say that today, a blessed Ramadan to folks in the room as well. So, you ready? All right. So, first of all, I want to invite us to consider that if you are going to be an effective leader for the next round, that you must pay attention to the context before content. Those of you who were in the session with me earlier today will remember that I talked about the importance of the context and not running too quickly to the content. Kevin said nicely a number of things that's informing the context of our leadership right now. Some of the things that are going on and some of the ways that we need to pay particular attention. So I want you to think about what are the things that informs your context. And I want you to hold that you inform the context, what your experience has been, what you understand, what you know, what your identities are. The environment that you are in informs your context. And whether you are in Florida, that might be a little bit different than if you are in Baltimore, or that might be different than if you're in Iowa. So what's the contextual space of the environment? You must also pay attention to who's in the room. So who's the we that informs the context? Who am I talking to? Am I by myself? Am I with others? You must pay attention to time. Time informs our context, and timing informs our context. Are we talking about things after Charleston? Are we talking about things after Charlottesville? Am I trying to lead in the context of great hurt and pain? Am I trying to lead from a visionary place? Context before content. Is that making sense to you? Right? The last thing then there is the quality of our engagement. So when I talk about context, I want the next generation of leaders to understand before you lead or talk about anything that you matter. Who you're talking to matters. Where you're talking matters. The timing and the quality of the engagement is the first things that I want you to pay attention to. Context before content. The next thing is that your identity. And so I want to drill down a bit on the identity. How do my identities inform the lens through which I see? How does the fact that I am a first-generation college student or that I am a legacy student inform what I see or pay attention to or what my experience has been in the place? How does the fact that I was assigned male at birth have me experience different things than had I been assigned female at birth? How does feeling congruent with that assignment inform my experience differently than if I don't feel congruent with that assignment? Does that make sense? Are you getting that? So identity matters. Now I tell folks, I've been black all my life, far as I know. But just because I've been black doesn't mean I know what it meant to be black. And it doesn't mean I understood how my identity, my race identity, informed the lens through which I saw the world. Nor did I understand how my religion identity informed the lens through which I saw the world, or my age. And so I want to invite you to consider your identities. And how do those inform how you navigate the world? What you see, what you don't see, what you think is an issue, what you don't think is an issue. Identity matters, and allow it to be on the table. Number 3, the next generation of leaders will need to be as emotionally intelligent as they are cognitively intelligent. It is not going to be enough to know a lot alone. Many of you have great GPAs or doing really well in your majors and so on, and we really tout ourselves on being in honor societies, and we hang our hats on the fact that we have 3.9s and 4.0s and 3.5s. Well, that's good. But if you look at the data in terms of workplace, it is not that area in which people are struggling. It's not about the information that you have. It's about the quality of the relationships that folks are able to engage in, and that is connected to one's emotional intelligence. So I want you to think about, for number 3, that you must be, for the next round, as emotionally intelligent as you are cognitively intelligent. Take a deep breath. Number 4 is I want us to really get clear about why it all matters. What are you here to do? What's your purpose, right? As you get up every day, how many of us know that if you think about, so your major is not necessarily your purpose. You might get lucky and happen to be majoring in the stuff that matters in terms of why you're on the planet. But many of us are operating in jobs and in workplaces and studying things that really have very little to do with our purpose. And so I want you to think about, what is it that gets me going? What is it that when I look out into the world and see as a problem, and I know that I've been uniquely positioned here to fix it? Purpose. As the next generation of leaders, where will you lead? How many know there's a lot to do? There's a lot of work. There's a lot of hurt. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of unfinished things. And I want you to think about what's your part. One of my biggest learnings was I struggled for a long time with why everybody wasn't as excited about the stuff that I was excited about. Well, how are you going to call yourself a good human being if you're not? It's like, well, Jamie, they are not called to that same thing. And I think that the next generation of leaders are going to be more effective in helping each other if you can get clear about your purpose. From that place, number 5 is about having a vision. If you had a magic wand and you could wave it and fix the world, fix the situation, what would it look like? Part of what the struggle is today with our generation of leaders is that we're able to critique but not in vision. And so I want us to not just be able to see the problem, but to envision a world where that problem is no longer there, where we have figured out some of the answers and some of the ways to make it better. Number 6, what gets us stuck often is either or thinking, living in the black and white, living in binary thinking. And it's going to be critical as we have discourse in this free marketplace and enterprise and democracy that we're able to hold more than one truth. How do I show up being able to engage folks who see the world very different than me? Owning both and not just either or. Number 7, and this one is most critical for me as I look out in this 100th anniversary celebration. Acknowledge, celebrate, and appreciate progress. What I say to the next generation of leaders all the time is that this did not start with you, and it will not end with you. When we show up in a space not honoring the labor that has gone before us to make it possible for us to be in a room, we dishonor those who did the work. When I show up on a campus or show up in an organization and I say, well, race relations are worse today than they were 50 years ago, I dishonor my grandmother, who cleaned houses so that I could have a college education, who listened to names and words being spoken and did not have the space to speak to that. And so I want us to remember, as we hold both and, to acknowledge, celebrate, and appreciate progress. That is not to take away from the work that needs to be done to move us forward, but we must not act as if nothing happened till we got into the space. Does that land? Is that making sense to you? Right? So I want you to be able to do that. And finally, these last two, you cannot do this alone. Look around your tables, look around this room, and recognize that it is important for you to build real and authentic relationships that go beyond being in the same room with people. What this generation must recognize is proximity does not equal capacity. Just because you went to class with one, just because you just had an advisor who was one, just because you went and hung out at dinner with one, does not mean that you have the capacity or you have built relationships across difference. Does that make sense to you? And so some of what happens on many of our campuses where there's a good deal of demographic diversity through all different lenses, we get hung up in thinking that because there is diverse demographics, that means we are in relationship. And it is not necessarily so. I want you to pay attention to this story as I begin to wind down. I was doing some work with a financial company, and I was in a 5-day institute, and there was a gentleman who I had worked with for all 5 days, and he was a young white man who was married to a Japanese American woman. And on the 4th day of this experience, he came to me. They had 2 children. One was 5 and one was 7 years old. He came to me on the 4th day and said, Jamie, this has been amazing. Thanks so much for your work. Guess what I discovered last night? And I said, what? He said, my children are part Japanese. I said, really? I share that story because You can go to school, you can work, you can date, you can marry, and you can have children and still not engage across the difference. And so I need us to get in real relationships across the dynamics of difference so that, again, we can recognize how to not do this alone. Finally, it is not all about you. Leaders, I need you to be really clear that if, in fact, you are not preparing the folks who will come behind you to pick up the work of ODK, you are not doing your job. You should not be waiting until June or May or April to try to figure out who's going to run for the next position. You should have been working all along to prepare the persons who are going to follow you. So it is so important. I've worked so many times with folks who are struggling with we can't get anybody to run for this, and I guess the only person that's left is going to be the president, right? The only person. So that's not the way we need to be doing the work. And we must be doing the work in a way that the persons behind us will pick up from where we left off and not have to clean up the mess we left. So it is not all about you, it is about the work. And finally, what I want to leave with you is the importance of taking care of yourself and each other. I know that there's lots of work to be done. There is big work that needs to be done. And my work may not be your work, and I may not decide to do it in the same way that you do it. But it is important for me to know that it didn't start with me and it won't end with me, and that I won't be effective at doing it if I am not taking care of myself. Hurting people hurt others. And so, if I am in pain, that will show up in my leadership. And so I want you to pay attention to, when have I taken a nap? When have I taken a break? When have I gone on vacation? When have I recognized that I needed to step away? Leaders, for the next round, I need you to recognize this leadership community, and to not leave here tomorrow without having made real connections and built the capacity to be in real relationships. I often will hear folks say, I wish leaders would do this. I wish leaders would do that. I wish leaders understood. I wish we didn't have to worry about this. I wish. And what I say to all leaders is that a wishbone will never suffice where a backbone is required. If you are to be a leader for the next round, you will not wish that into place. You will have to do the work so that you can show up leaving the planet better than you found it. I believe you can. I hope you will.